And we are all right. Let's get
Amazing.
to it. 10:05. So welcome everyone to our next episode of AI That Works. Our whole goal here is always the same: write code that works and see if we can do some incredible things with AI that doesn't depend on waiting for GPT 26. My name is Vaibhav. I am one of the creators of BAML, and my wonderful co-host is Dexter. I'll let him introduce himself.
I am working on, my name is Dexter. I build things. That's probably all you need to know. Try to help people build very cool AI stuff. Whether it's agents, whether it's pipelines, whether it's full stack applications. Yeah, I'm not going to go deep into it.
Cool.
Real quick announcements, just updates for those of y'all. I'll just say it again one more time on the stream. Is like, so we're gonna do these. We do these every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then we launch the. I guess this is good context to lead into where we're going. We publish the videos Fridays at 8 a.m. Um, and we will push up everything in this show will be in the GitHub repo here. I'll put in the Zoom chat. So all the notes from previous episodes, everything will be live by Friday. I have a short link, but this is just the GitHub repo. Oh, that's not right. Sorry. hlyr.dev/AITW. That'll take you to all the previous sessions and you can watch the recordings. You can see the notes, and the notes from this session will be there, and any useful links and things like that, and all of the code.
Yeah.
And
And
it takes
again,
a lot of work.
the reason that we try and share all the code is honestly because there's a lot of people out there talking about how you can theoretically build things. We just want to see the code. We're all engineers, or eventually everyone will be an engineer. Today, everyone uses Excel. Tomorrow, everyone's going to write code. It's just the way it is. We might as well share all the code and share what we can learn along the way. With that in mind, today's topic is one Dexter and we're very, 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 very excited about. All this work that we do every week is really freaking annoying sometimes. This actual recording is
Whoa,
fun.
we love
Recording
doing
is
it.
fun.
We love doing it, but it's a
No,
lot
no,
of
I
time.
agree. And I think the part that's the most annoying is the manual part of like downloading the videos, uploading them to YouTube, getting the transcript, sending out the email afterwards. And sometimes you probably notice like 4 of our episodes didn't send an email out. That's because that's not what we love doing. We just like writing code. That's the thing that we love the most. So we thought, why don't we actually go put some of the practices that we've talked about in the previous episodes into practice and build a pipeline that can go do something. And the thing that we thought was worth doing was really building the AI content pipeline. So what we're going to start off with today is we're going to screen share. We're going to show you a live demo of what works today, what doesn't work today. Then we're going to talk about the architecture diagram on a whiteboard. And then afterwards, we're going to go make the pipeline better. Because I think those are the steps that I find to be personally really interesting. So with that, let's kick it off. Today's is going to be even more interactive than normal. So if you have questions, please hop off mute. Just come and ask yourselves. That's why we do this over Zoom and not a podcast recording software or anything else, because it's just way faster and people get to ask real questions along the way. With that, let's get started. And I will say, I am one of the least vibe coding people out there. I don't really vibe code. But thanks to Dexter, and actually credit to my cousin as well. I'm a big believer. Everyone should be vibe coding a lot more than they think they should. If you were vibe coding before, you probably should vibe code more than you thought you were. And here's what we were able to do with this pipeline. So right over here, the first thing you'll notice is we are able to sync with Zoom and actually record all the previous recordings up here. So we can actually see any of the previous recordings. You can see one right over here. This current one is literally going on right now. We started the recording and it pops in immediately. We can see our previous recordings and we can just import and process them. What happens when you import and process a recording, I'll just kick one off,
I'll
is
just real quick call out. It says the title still says cracking the prompting interview. I think that's like inherited from BAML, but this is this current episode. Or
same thing
inherited
with
from
Zoom.
Luma or whatever. From
Exactly.
when
But
Luma
Luma
created the
just doesn't
Zoom, it
make the
left the
right.
title.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll just start off this one. AI that works, designing evals. We'll create the import. So now you can see the
So
video gets processed.
this is one we already did all the work in the email for, but the idea is going
Exactly.
forward, we would use this.
So while it's processing, I'll let it kick itself off and you can actually see what it's doing. When it's processing, it's actually going ahead and downloading the full video. And it's going to go ahead and eventually it will get to a point where once the video is downloaded, it'll actually upload itself to YouTube automatically. It'll download the full transcript. Then it'll start producing key points and video summaries. And then after it's done, it'll actually produce like an email draft. I guess I don't have that here. This one didn't finish. Once it's done, it'll actually produce like an email draft of what to go send out. I'll produce like an X post that we can go copy and paste and post out there, and I'll produce like LinkedIn content as well. So this is what we mean by multi-channel content. Download a 60-minute video, go for it, go summarize it, get the key topics and takeaways, and then go draft things. Now, what you'll notice here is that this email does read like AI still. It's still not.
Yo, this email
good.
sucks, dude.
Exactly. So we're gonna talk about how to make it better.
Did you even look at the prompt?
No, I didn't. I vibe code the whole thing because the point, what I think this is the point I want to stress today, is before you can even work on your AI part of your pipeline, you're not even at the point where you can start working on that. What you need is infrastructure that you can actually iterate on. And if we hadn't built this whole system out that could do the glue code, building the AI part is completely useless because it doesn't really matter. I still need to build the rest of it. And the rest of it is actually critical to my iteration loop. And we talk about this in our evals video a lot, where if you're evaling, you should spin up a quick little UI to go determine if your evals are correct or not and go compare the differences. If you're building a pipeline, you should be doing the same thing. And right here, you can see the same thing. It actually is going ahead, and let me see if the socket connection works. Yeah, there we go. It's actually able to also stream out the outputs if I wanted to, which is really useful for me to iterate a little bit faster along the way. I'll pause really fast. Questions so far? Cool. Let's keep on going.
How long was it end to end? Did you say 3 hours or something to build this?
I logged off after 3 hours. I don't know how late Bob was up last night.
It took a total of 6 p.m. to about 2:30 a.m. Combined with an hour and a half break in the middle.
Nice.
Pranay.
You're new to the session.
Pranay, you got to go watch the other episodes. We don't do frameworks here.
And the reason we don't do them is more often than not, they just get in the way and they make it harder to go do things rather than easier. With that, let's talk about what this architecture diagram ends up looking like. Unless there's a couple more questions about this itself.
Yeah, let's draw it out and then let's make the actual AI generated stuff not suck.
I agree. All right, pull this down. Oops, why is my mouse not working? We did record the whole thing. You can watch it at 2x speed. We'll post it. Well, not the whole thing.
We're gonna post the recording. We gotta edit a couple things out, but yeah, you can watch the beginning.
All right. So let's talk about what the architecture of this whole system is and how we actually did this. And we will probably try and record more of our coding sessions along the way. If people find it interesting, we can invite you to them and watch this code in real time as well, along with just going to go do that. So there's actually 3 main parts to the system. And I think it's useful to draw them out in totally different systems. This one is the database. Then we have the backend. And then we have the front end. Okay. So another thing that we did is what we said is we will actually not allow the front end to really get data from the back end. It's not allowed to. It's allowed to issue requests to the back end, but it can't get data from the back end. The back end is allowed to read and write from the database, and the front end is allowed to read from the database. So we get really, really nice queries of how things are being built out. And the reason that this is so important is because if you're doing something like streaming or interactive UIs, building out the system from your backend that communicates with your front end is a pain in the ass. And if you're doing it in a lot of different places all the time, this is what real-time databases were made for. Just use them. and you can solve a lot of your pain. And you might run into a
And so
slightly
basically the data API is just your database schema. The front end just needs to know the raw schema and it can query whatever you want to expose to it, right?
Yes, exactly. So as long as you have like a view in your database that is accessible, that is readable, and you have like some materialized view of it that is secure, doesn't have anything like PII data or something along that, or at least requires like authenticated users to access it, then you can go ahead and go access this along the way. It does require some consideration of exactly how you do it. The easiest way to do it is a materialized view if you want to do it securely on your actual data, so you can go configure that in a good way. But once you can go do that, now you're able to build a pipeline that is mostly just workflows in your backend that is issuing work one after another. So for example,
And you kind of get rid of this like state machiney thing where the front end's like pushing data and then fetching it back out of the back end. It's kind of this unidirectional flow. And I think a lot of like this happened in React. We had React for like a year and a half, and then people realized like the current backend paradigm in React, which at the time was things like Backbone JS and things like that, just didn't work well for the amount of complexity people were using to add React into their apps. And all this stuff like Flux came out, and there was an explosion of like 6 different frameworks all came out that one summer of like, how do you do this unidirectional data flow? Because it was what worked for real-time dynamic applications.
Yeah, and this is a pattern that we've seen happen a lot. Like we just find it way easier. And this is similar to video games and all these other things that you might want to do. Where what you really want to go do is you have some, what I would call like state of truth that is represented here. And all you want to do is you want to render the truth as fast as possible to the front end. And it's really easy to do that when you're able to go ahead and actually model the truth in a way that is representative in the way that the front end can use it. And the challenge then becomes building a schema that everything else can go use correctly. So you do have to plan that out a little bit, but I think it pays for itself personally in terms of like the developer ease and how easy this ends up being. This also does really nice componentization for both like parallelizing workflows in terms of how many people can work on it, and not just people, but agents. It makes it way easier for my front end to actually understand what it's rendering. If now the one part that we run into is in order to go do this, what you'll find is you have data models. Sorry, I'll draw another rectangle. You have some data models that you're saving into your database into here. And these data models both have to be used by Python and written from Python, and then they also have to be used and written by TypeScript. Having some way to keep these in sync is also really important. Otherwise, you end up, again, in a world of pain, and that doesn't really work. And figuring out which side you're on is really, really important of how you go do that. But once you can nail that down, your iteration loop is going to be really fast, and adding new features, as we'll see today when we add another feature, such as chapter summary into our system, becomes a thing that you can just vibe code trivially. And you don't have to think about it anymore because your agent kind of understands the architecture of what you're building out, and it's so nicely componentized that it doesn't have room for making mistakes along the way. It's like you're basically built in an API contract. If your front end was both reading and writing to the database, you now have a choice. The agent now has to make an implicit decision of, do I do this in the front end or do I do this in the back end? And that's a choice. And it might make one choice correctly, one choice wrong. But the more you go along, the more choices that will be made incorrectly just by volume and by the nature of it happening automatically. By doing this, we make a very clear direction of what Dexter is saying. It's very easy what it does. The front end's job is to render the content and issue new background tasks. The back end job is to plumb and churn on data and eventually write updates to the database. The database's job is to send data out to the front end as soon as possible. And now it's very clear what we have to go represent along the way. With that, let's talk about some of our routes. I do have a very opinionated stance on what's a great data model agnostic library, as we'll see today. But we'll show that in a second. We'll show the full code. So what's the APIs that we actually have? We have a couple APIs that we defined. We have, Dexter, do you remember what they are by video? We have one API to like submit a new request.
Did you push the latest code? I can pull it down and pull that out real quick.
yeah, let me do that actually. I don't think I did. Oh, I might have. I guess I did.
Cool.
Oh, I did.
I will get the API endpoints. Turns out there's AI is pretty good at generating a list of API endpoints.
Provide feedback. And then what we do is we submit a new request, provide feedback, get list of videos. So there are some things that we do from the back end. Get list of videos, provide feedback, and then what's the other stuff? I think there's one more, get title. Oh, there we go. I don't know why I didn't do that. Okay. So these are basically all the APIs that we have. We did have to build one integration because we get actual Zoom API calls. We don't want to do that in a real-time database. We want the backend of access. So this is something that the front end queries from directly. This is the way they add feedback to a draft. So if you don't like an email, what we're able to do is we can just go through and say like, oh, I can just leave feedback and say, this is not long enough.
Dude, you got to make it more Gen Alpha.
Enough emojis. And I'll just refine the email. And what this will do is this will commit a task, and eventually the email will get refined along the way. And I did not add
I think
string-
I don't know whether I don't know if you're planning on getting this, but I think it would be really helpful to kind of see the sequence diagram or the flow chart of like how stuff flows through the system.
Yeah, I was going to get to that once I show all the routes.
Okay,
That's
cool.
a good idea.
Cool.
So, and then we basically have all these routes. So let's look at what this actually ends up looking like in a sequence flow in that case. So we have all these things. So the first thing that we have is, oops, I can't draw it there. I will try and do this side by side.
Oh, I'm missing a couple endpoints. One sec.
Oh, you are? Okay, that's what I thought. It looks like you
Core
don't.
one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the first 5 are actually the most important.
Oh, did I lose this? Oh, sorry. I have to adjust my, okay, there we go. So what we have here looks like this. The first step that happens is the backend submits a task to say like, I want to process this specific meeting ID. The front end submits a task to submit, I want to process meeting ID. The backend then gets all the data, submits a background task. So it responds very, very fast to the front end saying, cool, I got you. And then the background task will go ahead and kick off and then say something like the following, where it'll say something like download video plus transcript. Finding the video is a little bit more complicated than I presume, because not all Zoom videos don't only have one video, say sometimes have multiple because people start and stop the recording and other things along the way. So we have to go do that. Then we will kick off a couple jobs in parallel. One of them is upload to YouTube. And then simultaneously, we also kick off the summarize task. Once the summarize task is done, we kick off 3 tasks in parallel again. Draft email, draft Twitter, draft X, and then draft LinkedIn.
Does the summarize task also output the like key points and stuff like that?
Exactly. That's what it outputs. It outputs like a general summary of everything.
So the database updates from each of these is like basically like mark uploaded in DB.
Exactly.
And then this is like add summary points to DB.
Exactly. And actually this one streams in, so I actually like save the whole thing on every update of the tick of the stream.
Yep.
Exactly. And technically there's a special thing that there's one last thing that I do over here, which is like, whoops. I mark the database as it's done summarizing. It's important that I can like mark the state at each single one of them, and that's something else I had to do. Because once it was done summarizing,
Yeah, that's actually I think that's actually worth maybe taking a sec to drill into is just kind of like having your kind of job system just be a table with a bunch of nullable columns, and you can tell what's been done just by what's set in the database. And in that way, I mean, it's not as like robust as something like big and like chonky like temporal or something like that, but it is honestly probably good enough, especially if you're building like internal tools for yourself, which is super high leverage, I think, these days. Just that idea of like a really simple job system.
The problem that I ran into when I was doing purely nullable fields is that I wasn't doing JSON parsing. Sorry, like once I was streaming, I had something in there when it wasn't done. So I actually needed to keep a status of it a little bit more
I see.
because like I needed to know the status of like, is it started, is it streaming, or is it done? And the status was really important.
Cool.
And having it available was important to actually show the UI there. And then the other thing that I did was I got bored, so I added one last thing. I added, while I was at it, I was like, okay, let's just, why not? We did all these three things. So I just asked it to literally follow this example along the way. And I said, draft a title for me after you're done. So that became the next thing that we did. So now we had 4 pipelines that could trigger and process. Once this was done, I have another thing that I could do, which was a user.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Sorry, do me a favor real quick. Hit 5. And just change the arrow to this one over here. Because those macaroni arrows suck.
I agree.
Oh, so you
Thank
got it
you.
again. Yeah, if you hit 5 twice, I think it cycles through. It used to happen to me all the time. It still happens to me all the time.
Thank you. This is why I'm really bad at Excel draw. Then we get another.
You're
so
getting
this
pretty fucking good, dude.
Now we have another request that the user can do once all of these are done. And remember, all this is streaming to the real-time database. So it's very easy for my front end to render this because it's just rendering a blob of JSON that is strongly typed, and I know how to render it, so it becomes trivial for me to go render. I just build React components for all those types. Then I built a second part of the pipeline, which said like if the user will make like a draft ID, content type, and then their feedback. So the user wants to commit feedback to one of these emails. So each of these drafts has an ID, they have a version history and everything attached to it. There's different content types and medium, so like email, X, and LinkedIn. And once this happens, we do the same exact thing that we were doing before. Oops. Where this time, instead of our normal background, we kick off another background process. And this background process, again, responds very fast to the LLM saying, okay, cool, I'll take care of that for you. And once that is done, it goes to the real-time database, pulls out the draft, pulls out the transcript, draft, transcript, and then issues that to a prompt, saves a new version, and then writes that to the database. And that's all this pipeline is. There's nothing fancy about this. And it's really just kicking off background workers constantly to go do work for me while I go and allow myself to iterate fast along the way. Does this give everyone a good idea of what the background pipeline looks like and how we're able to go and iterate on this pipeline along the way? There's a question from Vijay.
So in the first instance, when you created the draft, did you use the transcript or did you use the summary of the transcript?
I just use at the time I didn't actually think about using the transcript, so I just used the transcript. We can update that to go use the transcript as well. This is why the
You mean
draft
the summary?
Got it.
Yeah, I only use a summary, not the transcript. Sorry. This is why these initial drafts are bad. That's so like when we go look on this and we actually look at the UI on here. Where'd it go? Oops. Find the right screen. I don't know where it went. I don't know where arc is. Sorry. Okay, I guess it's here. This is why the original draft was really bad. And like now that I told it to go and add more feedback with like emojis, you can see it added more emojis in this one. But the first one didn't have any of that. And like this, it's going to be bad. It doesn't have any of this. It writes your name. I have to fill this stuff out. It's kind of annoying. But that's because I have really given it no context, and the AI part of this is not even close to done.
Okay,
But
cool.
we could
So
have-
so to test this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna change the prompt, and then we're gonna re-import a whole video from scratch, and then we're gonna see if the drafts are better, right?
Well, we can just regenerate the summary, but yes. We don't actually have to
No, I was
re-input.
no, that was your lead in. This is where we go way down into the inner loop and we say, hey, okay, cool, let's go get a real record from the database and then like write a test for it.
Yeah, let's go do that actually.
That's the old way. That's how I would have done this a year ago. It's just kind of test the thing end to end, right?
Well, I think that's the point. Like, let's show the end-to-end testing loop and let's show the faster loop once we're able to go do it. So in
Cool.
this case, does that answer your question, Vijay?
Yes, it
I
does.
will-
Thank you.
Perfect. Yes. So now let's go ahead and actually go and try and make some of this pipeline better. Now, there's a couple of questions to ask about how do we keep all the state in sync and everything. So I'll just show you a little bit more of the code and what it ends up looking like, because I think it is useful to have some dive through before we go and change a bunch of things. I'm also going to show how to go make this work with Claude code and how to go edit it to add a new part of the pipeline. Because the problem that I actually noticed the most, if we actually look at some of the prompts, they're just long. It just like doesn't really talk about the real part of it. Like it adds a feedback, it dumps a transcript in there, which is fine, but it's like it doesn't really understand what I mean by actually making the prompt better. And what makes a good email. It's same thing with this. It's like it doesn't really understand about what is a good Twitter thread when it does this along the way. Because I don't think this
Right.
is
It's giving it instructions about what to do, not so much about like what looks good, like what good looks like.
Exactly. And like, but we can't focus on what good looks like until we have the mechanics of what to do really plumbed in, because I will spend a lot more time iterating on the infrastructure. Like I said, this took about 8 hours of work to go from nothing to a fully generating SaaS flow that does this. And that's worth doing. But if I just built the AI part, I wouldn't, even if I thought this was useful, Dexter and I wouldn't actually use this app. It would be unusable. So we need to build a flow that made sense for us in a way, and then we can go and make the AI part better. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of Python scripts that you don't actually use, and now they're trash. And that was a waste of time. So building the whole thing out is worth it, because then you can decide how to actually design the AI along the way. With that, let's talk about some of this stuff. So this data model called Twitter thread. This is what we're rendering both in the back end and the front end. And I'll show you how this gets used in the front end. And I'm just going to exclude all the Babel font code. Oops. All we do is we just regenerate types, and we generate types for both front end and back end types, and now we just use them here. So in this case, we have a Twitter thread, this gets imported, and now my UI component just renders this. So what's really nice about this is if I tell the model to go change what it means to be a Twitter thread, my front end will break at compile time, and now it will go actually, Claude Code can go fix it for me. So I actually get types that are in sync perfectly along the way, rather than anything else. And the way that I'm able to do this is I just cogent both types. I cogent the Python versions that my backend uses and writes to the database. And then I cogent the React versions that my front end uses. And I just use the same types to basically issue the glue code along the way. So I think Joe asked a question earlier of what I used to go do that. And this is what I found worked for me. And
Okay, so you have the back end. The back end is getting the transcript, and then it's passing it to methods in BAML and Python with using Pydantic. And then when it gets them back, it's storing those to the database. And because it's all generated from the same BAML kind of contract API specification, when those same kind of JSON objects get served to the front end can use the generated client that got made from the exact same specification to render those things and have type safety around them and know exactly what they look like when they're being rendered.
Exactly.
Cool.
So you get really convenient type systems along the way. With that, let's focus on actually making some of these prompts better. So the first thing that we'll notice is generate a custom Twitter thread. One thing that I did not do because I was vibe coding, I found this helpful writing the UI much better. The V0 UI is okay, but the problem is when you're actually syncing a backend and front end together, using V0 is a really, it's hard. Because what I need
You have to
is
find a way to. Well, you have to find a way
Well-
to make sure V0 fully understands the like data contract and the models that are available, right?
Exactly. Otherwise, it just changes things, and then I'm stuck in I'm iterating way slower. And it's fine if your entire app is purely built in TypeScript, but if you have long-running workflows, it's not going to be built purely in like your Next.js app won't define everything. And like that just doesn't work. So that's why I had to go down this road. And I think a lot of people are using like non-TypeScript backends, or they have non-TypeScript backends already that they want to pull data from. And it's just useful to have one data architecture that does this. You can still do it in V0, but it's just it doesn't have the context. And if it breaks the types, then my whole app is broken. That sucks. With that, let's focus on specifically one of it. I think the thing that I dislike the most is actually the email draft. And Dexter and I have a couple emails that we've sent out. We like those. So why don't we just do something silly and see if we can make the email draft better by doing the dumbest thing possible, which is first.
Oh, wow. Is the never use few shot prompting guy gonna use few shot prompting in this episode?
I'm going to add a transcript actually first.
Okay.
Now this is not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Claude Code and I will tell it to update the Python code that calls email draft to pass in the transcript. Cool.
And this is, I mean, coming back to that idea of like V0 needing more context about all your other systems to work well, I think it becomes like your job as the prompt engineer to, or actually we'll say context engineer, which is like to give it a good prompt and then give it all the context that it needs. And some of these like coding agents that run in the CLI, like Claude Code or even Cursor Agent, like they tend to be pretty good depending on the size of the project. It gets a little uh, tricky, harder. You just have to be more thoughtful if the project's huge. But especially for small projects, they can be very good at finding all the right context for you so that, and kind of taking that job of like getting all the right files and pasting them into the right place. Take that off your plate, basically.
Exactly. And now you can see it's passing the transcript for me automatically. And in theory, do you want to make sure, I don't want to ask again. I don't know
YOLO
why
mode.
I just gave it all the
YOLO mode.
permissions.
Let's go.
And now that's actually going to go ahead and go update the transcript here. I haven't done a session on Claude Code and Cursor, but we probably will at some point. Dexter was on this yesterday, and I was not about it, but Claude Code is, in my opinion, much superior to Cursor's agent. Relative.
Yeah,
to
we
agents.
will do in the next couple of weeks a deep dive probably into
Coding.
vibe coding. It'll be a little bit different than like the like, hey, let's go like really fine tune, refine a bunch of pipelines, but I think it could be a fun episode.
What do I not like about few-shot prompting? The reason I think I specifically say this so egregiously and so aggressively about few-shot prompting is a lot of people do use few-shot prompting as like a crutch to try and get the model to do what they want, without understanding that they're actually injecting a lot of bias in the model. So let's say you're building a healthcare company and you're using few-shot prompting to teach the model how to do like detect the right verbiage from a doctor. That could be good or it could be really bad. Like let's say, for example, you wanted to go you want to talk about like some sort of like weird liver disease that a person has, and that's the few-shot example you use. It's a really rare disease. 1 in like 1,000,000 people have it, so it's really unlikely to impact anything. And then a customer comes in with the same exact name as the example in your prompt, in your few-shot example. You're gonna have a hard time not telling the model that this is truly an example and not an example that's related to that customer from a different doctor. It's just a
Right, it's
hard
going to
thing to.
infer meaning from things that you didn't intend for it to like include as part of the example. Like that people named Sarah are likely to have a rare liver condition or something. But like
Or
when
just
you give
that
it
the
that
same
example, it's
Sarah
going to
is
learn
going
from
to a
that.
different doctor, right? Even a simpler
Yeah.
assumption, just the person Sarah is going to a different doctor now, and it's an updated conversation. You're giving me an example, but it's also an example about the same person. And whether or not the model understands that or not doesn't really matter. It's just
Yeah.
more so just that like you just have to know the biases you're injecting. In our case, we know Dexter and I are recording these videos. We know our tone is what we want to go embed. So if we put a few shot example in here, it's just going to do what we want exactly. Because I'm not going to run this on any other videos but the AI that works videos. Now we do recordings for our team meeting sometimes. If I use the same prompt in here, it will not generate a good email because I've few shot exampled it for that specific scenario. So what I really, really like is this thing that I like to call dynamic few shot prompting. What is it? Workshop. And that works. It's just that most people don't do it. Or like partial few shot prompting. So like instead of actually telling the model that like, oh, in this case, if I want the model to really understand that engineering is only people that actively code, so like a VP of engineering isn't engineering their product, I can write that like this in my prompt where I don't actually give the full output in my prompt. I only tell it like, oh, because they don't code, the category is product. I missed out on everything else. I didn't add any other fields. So I'm letting the model really understand this is truly an example. It's even if there's another person named Vaibhav Gupta, this even to a human would be clear that this is an example without having to read too much into it. The default inference is an example. And also you can do more dynamic stuff, like for example, dynamically change the name of it. If for whatever reason I know the person has a name Vaibhav Gupta, change this name to be different for that example. Right. And that's just things that
I
you
see.
you can do to go make your few shot prompts a lot better.
Because if your prompt uses Vaibhav Gupta and then you pass in a new thing and the person's name is also Vaibhav Gupta, then it might assume that it's the same and that follows that pattern. When really you'd basically want to say like, okay, whatever the person's name we're testing on, make sure the name in the few shot example is different before we launch the prompt.
Exactly. So you want to kind of find you want to make it. I think the idea of few shot prompting is you want to guarantee the model thinks of the thing you're providing as an example. And
All right,
that
cool.
is a
Cool tangent.
Sorry. Yes, I get it.
Let's test this thing.
So let's add we added the transcript part in there. And like now I'll re-summarize
So the
this.
only thing we changed was we're using the exact same prompt. We're just also passing in the transcript.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is going to be really annoying because it just takes a while to go run. And while we're doing that, I'm actually going to go add something. And it's streaming this out, so we'll see if this is better or worse.
So sorry, did you just re-trigger all the processing for all the drafts, basically?
Just for this one. Yeah, exactly. For all the drafts and the summary. So now it's going to cost me a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So when you do re-summarize, it's going to re-pull out the bullet points for takeaways and key topics, and then it's going to go, because the upstream thing changes, going to go regenerate all the drafts.
Exactly.
Cool.
That's what I have kind of defined in here. And it just takes a while. I don't know why the models are so slow this morning. But they are. Now, as you can see, my iteration loop here is kind of hosed. It's very, very, very slow. So I'm going to try and make this iteration loop a little bit faster by writing some test cases. Now, the problem is writing test cases is actually kind of annoying because I don't actually want to do this. But these prompts are better. I actually think these key points are better than the previous one. Like it actually got one of the key things we talked about last time, which is RTFP, read the effing prompt.
Wait, sorry, did you change the summarization as well? I thought we left the summarization itself unchanged.
Oh, sorry. Whenever I do re-summarize, I actually regenerate the whole summary as well, not just the.
Okay, so this is just a second pass over the same data, right? You didn't change the inputs to the summary.
Exactly. So I just changed the email draft one, but I also I did the re-summarize button along the way.
Yeah. Okay, but you're talking about, hey, the fact that these points are better in this case is just at this time the model happened to pick better summary points. Okay.
Yes. So once this email is done, let's take it out. And this is why I added the re-summarize button, because like sometimes the summary is just off. And I don't really want to think too hard about it. So like the easiest way
You just
for me
want to try
do
again.
that, I just want to try again. So I wanted a way to re-trigger
And
the
you-
pipeline.
And you could do this actually because we wrote all the code and we have full control over the pipeline, you could actually do this in the code and say like, hey, just run it 3 times and show 3 summaries and I'll just pick one and then go do the rest of the pipeline. Like you could
Oh, I could have
implement
built
that pretty
that.
easily.
Yes.
Like Claude Code
I
could
could.
probably build that for you in 5 minutes.
And then the email summary, at some point we'll finish up. All the content is generated. I still have to refresh. This is the syncing point that I did not get perfect. Did this work? Did not. Let me try rerunning. I think OpenAI for some reason has been not working very well. Oh, I have an error here. Let me
Huh.
look at this.
Oh, Claude didn't quite nail it.
It didn't nail it. It's fine. But while it's doing that, I'm going to do something. I'm going to add some observability to my pipeline so I can actually iterate on it a little bit faster because the prompting is going to be so freaking slow otherwise. Yeah, I generated. I'm just going to do the dumb thing. As new project. I guess it doesn't really matter if you have API keys. You can just send data here with text.
AI that works is built on trust, folks.
Indeed it is. I will stop screen sharing though while I edit my .env file. We have some trust, but not infinite trust.
Yeah. Okay, so what you're doing is adding the API keys so that every AI call is basically going to be tracked, and so we can use
and
it to
the main thing I really want, to be honest, is I just want to go see the logs so that when it goes ahead, I can go ahead and just like turn it into a
yeah, turn it into a test case. And basically without that, what you could do is I guess you could like handcraft a test case by like going and looking in the database and like assembling the inputs yourself and then like writing a test case by hand.
Yeah, but I don't really want to do that. I just want to use like the real test case along the way. Yeah, there we go. Cool. This should, I think, be done now. It should have made some diffs along the way. Oh yeah, we forgot to pass in transcript. Generate email draft. Okay, cool. Okay, now what we should be able to do. I also made this other reset processing bug because like sometimes this button gets grayed out, and like sometimes it's in a bad state like it is right now because I restarted my server. So this just allows me to restart processing really, really fast. And now, in theory, oh, it just resets the state. In theory, this will work beautifully, but we'll see.
Starting BAML summarization for video.
Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, so the summarization is happening. So the real thing that I really want to do now is what I want to do is I want to focus on 2 parts. I want to make the summary as good as possible, and I want to make the email as good as possible. The only way I can really make the email very good is by being a really fast iteration loop. I'm actually iterating on the prompt now. Iterating on the UI layer is just too slow. I can't do that. I don't want to build state management, record repo on every single aspect of this. It's just going to be too slow. So I'm just going to go iterate on just the email now. On the summary
and you
side,
can apply the same concepts to the Twitter and the LinkedIn and all the other stuff.
And the reason that we're not,
we should also take.
But
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the reason that we.
Oh,
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Dexter.
We got a little bit of light. I just want to note, like, we should take some time at the end just to talk about, like, hey, what would be next for this thing? And, like, I imagine we'll keep working on this thing. And, like, what other things do we want this to do in addition to email and Twitter? How can we make it a little more backgroundy? How can we catch webhooks instead of, like, having to come here and click on stuff? There's a whole, like, next generation of this thing.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Vidya's got a question really fast.
So we are currently building the end-to-end pipeline to test this. But are you also going to do the piecewise test as well?
I'm literally about to do that right now. Now, what I
Great.
want to do for the piecewise testing is rather than running the piecewise testing on my own.
Oh, you got another error.
Okay, let me find this. Claude Code isn't doing this right, so I will find this myself. And just like fix it. Command C, Command B, backend. Hide my terminal. Let me turn on my Python strict mode really fast. And then it'll yell at me. Why did it yell at me? Oh, is this not avoidable? There we go. That's why it wasn't working. I wasn't calling the right code. That's good to know. Async. Where's the other one that I changed? Sorry about watching me live code. I was hoping to have most of this stuff done. Okay, I think it should be good now. But while this is done, let's talk about what the actual thing looks like. So I should be able to actually see the actual test case, and I should be able to go and edit it. There you go.
There we
So
go.
let's just
Yeah, maybe we just do
let's
not
wait.
the email one. We do a different one.
Exactly. So we're gonna say like the summarize, for example. And like, let's just make sure the summary is actually good. So let's just make this a test case. Let's work on this, and now we can go to.
So that was really fast. So what you did was you took a recording of an input-output pair for one of these calls and generated a test case so that you can go change the prompt and see how it affects the output, basically.
Exactly. Because what I'm finding now is I have the transcript. I can go play around with this. Like fundamentally, what I really need is I need a way to actually go see if this is actually going to work or not. How do I hide
Without
this?
having to go run the entire pipeline end to end.
Exactly. So now what I'm able to do is I can go see the pipeline, see what it's doing, and then I can just go like, first I can go see what the model did. And it's not like the model's key takeaways are just smaller than what I want them to be. I want them to be like paragraphs. So let's just change that a little bit. Let's add like let's see what the model actually does. It doesn't seem like the model is actually listening to me. It feels like what it's actually doing is jumping it out, even though I told it to give me an outline of a very, very dense summary in the system prompt. So let's try a different model. Let's just swap out to like Anthropic. I think I have a custom sonnet. And to see if sonnet will work along the way.
And so
And
basically
it
you
might
want it, before it starts dumping out JSON, you want it to kind of like outline its thoughts.
exactly outline a dense summary of the video, then answer, then fill out the summary. So example. I'll do that, sure. Schema, sure. Let's just try that. Maybe my prompt was bad. So let's just iterate and see if I can get the model to spit this out. And it's really wild how slow the models are. I feel like I'm being rate limited.
And this
So
is,
now you
yeah,
can-
this is this is that, like, we covered this in depth in the reasoning topic, right? Of like, how can you get a model to kind of like think about it before it starts generating the data that our program's actually going to use.
Exactly. So now it actually is generating a pretty good dense response of what it wanted, and then it's outputting the summary. And I think we'll see if this is actually better or not. I'll try with OpenAI again, just to see what it does. OpenAI GPT Pro. And you can see how fast I'm iterating here. And what I'm really trying to do here is I'm trying to figure out, is it doing what I want? Ah, that looks actually better than other things. Yeah. And I can even guide it, para 1, para 2, para 3. I can even make it write multiple paragraphs by like telling it what I want it to go do. Because this doesn't seem very dense. So let's let it go and do more along the way. Ah, this looks it looks like it's better on the right track because now I'm telling it to do multiple paragraphs. So let's see if it actually understood it. It still really did do multiple paragraphs. So let's like fill this out. Topic para. Topic 1. Para. Topic 1. Let's see. Topic 2 para. Since the videos are 60 plus minutes long, try and have time ranges. Time range. Cool. It'll get the gist of what I want. So I'm trying to force it to basically reason more along the way and reason the way that I really want it to go do. Nope, that didn't work at all. I'll rerun this one more time. One fast. And I think the other thing that I want to do is I want to see if I can get it to actually listen to me by making the temp. I had originally deliberately tried to keep the temperature higher for this kind of task. But I'm going to make it temperature 0 now and try this out one more time.
Nice. Oh, this is sick.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
And
now
then what are we
we're
going to
getting
go update the structured outputs to create timestamps or like chapter
We
summaries?
might not even need that. I just wanted to go
Okay.
have this because I wanted to use this as the summary first before it actually goes ahead and fills out main takeaways and everything else here. But we could update the structured output to also encode time things if you think it's useful. So let's go do that. Let's change main takeaways to include time data. Right. Let's add another field. Main takeaways. Timed data. Time data. Summary.
String array.
Well, the summary can be
it can just be one string.
exactly.
Okay.
And you can actually see what I was able to do. It took me a little bit of work to go get this. And now the model isn't actually going to go do this because it's like, I can just reason the data model. So it's using the flexibility to go do this on its own without really having to think too hard about this. But
And my question, I guess, and I think the answer is probably just vibes, but like, how are you deciding whether like what's the real trade-off between having it do this in the preamble versus having it do it in the data model?
what's the real trade-off? It's a couple of things. When it does in the preamble, it's not polluting the data model yet. So it allows it to like just like kind of have like scratch work when I'm actually doing work along the way to go produce some results. And that's the real benefit. What I find is in general, Anthropic listens to instructions a little bit better for this kind of stuff than OpenAI does. So like, I'll try to run this again with like Anthropic. And it should start sending the data. Now we're on here. I think we should have gone another one for email. Yeah. Where's the email stuff? Oh, the email one didn't run because I read.
I think you probably still have an error.
Yeah. So now we're actually able to go do this. It's generating time codes, generating a little bit more takeaways, but it still seems a little very one-dimensional compared to this, which is okay. I might actually be okay with like a one-level summarization here. It's not. It might not be a bad thing. But I think I will get slightly better key topics and bullet points along the way to go do this. Now I may not want to call this bullet points. It's like let's call this like aliases to like takeaways. Takeaways. right, description, action items, listeners action items, listeners can do to improve their skills. And you can see what this does to the prompt. It changes it to, instead of bullet points, we now have a field called takeaways. It's an action item listeners can do to improve their prompt, which I think in general is going to be very, very nice. So let's go run this
I'm
now.
also noticing that the time data from Anthropic is looks kind of hallucinated. It's just doing 0 to 15, 15 to 30, 30 to 45.
That's true.
Which is probably
And it
not
did
it's probably
something.
not good enough.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see if it did it this way. Yeah, it really just broke it up to almost like 4-hour chunks. And it's probably, I bet what it's doing is biasing up to 60 minutes videos are pretty long. Try have time reduced, synced to the transcript.
Cool. And this is
and I
again
might-
the thing we talk about all the time is like a tight iteration loop of like if you were doing this end-to-end testing or even with PyTest without like dedicated tools, I think this would probably take longer to kind of fiddle with. Nope,
Exactly.
didn't
It
work.
sounds like it's still using those. So like this might just be like a thing Anthropic is going to do unless I specifically
Mhm.
break down the transcript into like a shorter chunk. So we can just try that.
Oh, you want to try a separate method that chunks the transcript?
Like let's just like, I don't know, it's like 45 minutes. Well, I'm just gonna do like the dumb thing and just like Command X and just run that and to see what it does. It sounds like it looks like a little bit better along the way, but not too much. So like, let's just leave it for now, and like we'll come back to this in a second. But I think the summarizer looks significantly better at this point in terms of what we're going to go get. So now what we'll do is update my UI to show the new.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like if you wanted to do a pre-processing step on the transcript and really focus on splitting it up into time chunks and maybe like chunk it deterministically and then pass those chunks into models, you could do that.
Update my UI to show the new time data in the summary. Cool. Let's go do this. One thing I like to do when I go do all this stuff is like this stuff is done. So I'm just gonna stage this and then I'm gonna go tell it to go do this. And now it should be able to go find this and the time data should pop up in there. So I tried to guide it a little bit along the way. And it should hopefully be able to go ahead and see if we can find it.
Oh,
this is,
summarize.baml. Oh, it's too big for Claude to read it.
yeah, because of this test case. So what I will do,
Yeah.
I'll help it and split up the test case into a summarize test.babel. Which makes sense, like we will have a bunch of issues with long-term tests. Continue, I made the file smaller. So now that I can just put my test in here, now this file should be actually readable. That's actually one good thing for me to note in general from now on. Because transcripts are going to be long, I should keep all my tests in different files. In fact, I probably want each test to be its own file because I know transcripts will be long. Otherwise, like my AI code gen stuff will not be able to do it very well.
Yeah, and that's like another thing that I think would be cool for a vibe coding episode is like how do you make your code base easy for AI to use? And there's actually I think a really important balance between like if you have lots of little files, like really small files, then you're going to end up with like the AI has to remember to read every single file, and the prompting and the tuning is going to set it to be a little bit kind of like balanced in how much it reads. But if your files are too long, it's also trained to be a little bit kind of thrifty with how much of a file it reads, right? The models, the agents generally try to read like, okay, look, if I can find the right 100 lines, I'm just going to read those. And that can be an issue as well. And I think we found a lot of success in what we're doing is like, and is in prompting the model to like make sure it always reads 1,000 or 1,500. If it's a long file, read the whole file, because otherwise it ends up like I'm sure we've seen this in vibe coding where it's like re-implements a method that already existed somewhere else just because it didn't read enough of the file to see that that function was already there.
Exactly. So now I think it should be almost done. And it regen the code, which it didn't have to, but it did. That's okay. And now it should be able to update the UI as well. This is the only part about vibe coding. It's kind of annoying. I can't tell all the stuff. I think it's all done. Cool. Let's go back to the UI and see what it did. So now that we have this, now we can just re-summarize. Oh, it failed. Oh, I don't have my API key for Anthropic. Give me 1 second. Let me add that in really fast. It would be quite funny if I did not realize, but I was secretly just sharing all my API keys anyway because I had the screen up. But I think I have my other screen. End and API key. Okay. We'll restart the backend again. And now I'll try it some more time. Re-summarize. It is processing. And once it's processing, we will be able to go see everything soon. While we're going to go do this, why don't we use frameworks here? I want to show you the code that we're actually using to call the AI models, just to tell you an idea of why we don't use frameworks. I actually hate this cloud code. The fact that it consumes an editor slot is really annoying. But when I go down into this, all I'm really doing here is this. I'm just calling a method that calls summarize video. The summarize video is just the function that I've already defined that takes in a transcript, takes out a title, and spits out a data model. The fact that this uses an LLM doesn't really matter. And I don't really need a framework to go deal with this. In order to orchestrate it, all I do at this point is once the summary is done, I feed the summary into these 3 things, and I just code async io.gather it. So like the benefit that I'm getting from a framework just isn't worth the debugging headache that I would have to deal with. All I really want is I just want to have functions after one after another.
And this is one of the points I think we make a lot in 12-factor agents is basically the idea that like code is already a directed graph. And if you really like thinking in graphs, you can use frameworks that give you kind of this like nodes and edges structure. But what you're looking at, can you go back to that real quick? What you're looking at on the screen is a DAG. It's like do this thing and then fan it out and do these things and okay. Can you go back to the code real quick? You do this thing and then you do this thing and then you fan it out to these 3 things, and then when they're all done, then you go to another step. Like code is already a way of expressing directed graphs. And if you are able to write code and do the basics and maybe get help from a model in writing the code itself, then you should leave yourself open to whatever approaches and structures. And like now, because we control all this code, if we wanted to like add another step here that is pre-summary and then pass the output of that in addition to our summary here, we have the flexibility and the freedom to kind of architect this however we want. And by doing weird custom stuff, that's kind of how you find the boundary of what the model is capable of and kind of push the limits of what is possible with AI. If you're just kind of like using a generic approach, your quality is going to be capped at, whatever everyone else using the generic approach is able to do, versus if you open the box and start tinkering with the wires, you may be able to get better results.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other important thing to note is like most frameworks don't actually give you like full fundamental control of the full prompt. They add some preambles, they modify how your tools are being presented, because part of standardizing things, like passing between OpenAI and Anthropic, is standardizing something. And while it's true that you may want to go do that, the problem is the fundamental thing that you're passing into the model is these tokens. Like these tokens, oh, that's gonna take forever to render. I fucked up. Running a model on tokenizer in a browser is not a good call on very, very long text. But at some point, you're going to call the model in some way, and you're going to want a model to see those exact tokens. Your quality is strictly bound by the tokens you send in and out of the model. The only thing that configures what the model spits out is the tokens in, the tokens out. So if you can't control every token out there, you can't get it. So I think we've had some people, for example, that live from like other countries. And like if they use a library and they build a pipeline that's supposed to speak, let's say Japanese or like Persian or some or any other language along the way, like Hindi, anything. If the library injects a word of English, the model's gonna speak in English because it thinks it's allowed to do that. And it's really important that if you have control, you can actually have that access along the full way. Hopefully that answered the question, BJ. And now I think I canceled this again. Okay. Third time's a
Cool.
charm.
What do we want to get through before we kind of wrap for today and go to questions?
I think we can go to questions. I'm just gonna go. I showed kind of how to make the summary slightly better by going to go down this road. The last thing I was going to do was actually feed in the email and the transcript to the email to make it slightly better as well. So I'll try and get that wired up. And if I don't get it wired up on the call, I'll do it afterwards and go send out the content as well so people can poke around with the prompt. But you saw the iteration loop of what I do. I take the prompt. Once I have some data, I literally just go ahead and like make a test case from real data because I need to run the pipeline once. I don't want to have fake data. Fake data is the worst thing I can do because if I use AI synthetic data, it's going to work and then it won't work for my real problem. So I'll just run the pipeline once, pay the cost, download the test case, and then I will just iterate on the test case alone until I'm satisfied. Then have the AI model go fix all the downstream pipelines along the way.
Yeah, and this is
And
kind of
that's
what we
it.
did on the evals episode too, right? Which is like push real data, push a little bit of real data through the pipeline and then go look at it by hand and find, okay, this would make a good test case, or this is a good example of something that the model's not good at. And like part of baking golden files is about like, oh, this is a thing it did right and I like everything about this. Let's cement that as a test case. So as I change things, I know that that one will continue to work. And then also, hey, let me go find a thing that doesn't work and let me go take that down and put it on the workbench and tinker with the prompt and iterate on it.
Exactly. And I think if I go look at the new summaries, like we've generated quite a few summaries at this point. I think this is the most recent one. We're clearly generating time codes and everything else. So the fact that the UI isn't rendering it means that Claude Code just messed up in the UI and didn't render this correctly. So I just need to go debug that and figure this out. But it's really easy for me to be like, cool, the time codes look good, and this might be good enough for the next step of the pipeline. So it allows me to just debug really, really quickly to see what's actually happening under the hood. With that, let's break for questions really fast. And if we don't have any, we'll just keep vibe coding for like the next 10 minutes or so.
What do you think about
Kyle
tools like the Vercel AI SDK that still give you all that flexibility to do whatever you want, but also give you tons of helpful stuff for streaming and tools and UI and React integration and other helpers and utilities?
What do I personally think about the Vercel AI SDK? I think the Vercel AI SDK is okay, to be completely honest. I think the biggest problem that I have with the Vercel AI SDK is that one, it's too deeply tied to a lot of native Vercel stuff. And two, I don't actually think it captures the nuance of what streaming actually is. A lot of people think of streaming for structured data to be trivial, but it's actually a really, really, really hard problem. And I'll show you why it's hard. And why
I'm
you
aware
can't actually.
of why it's hard. I wrote the tool streaming for VLLM. So
Okay.
I'm familiar with, I've actually contributed to the streaming in the AI SDK too. I guess like I've used it on projects where I've never used Vercel at all. Like it doesn't force you into Vercel's ecosystem. It's actually like totally independent of their
Oh,
platform.
yeah.
So I was just
I
curious,
think
like, because it gives you lots of great stuff for like generating, like if you're doing like tool calls or structure generation, it lets you stream that object to the, your React app or whatever and get a hook so that you can see, okay, well, this field has been generated and now this field has been generated. And so you can like make your user interface interactive as, like for example, if you're generating a complicated object, you can make your time to interactivity and time to user feedback faster. But I like it's the one thing it does force you into is using Zod. Like it's very opinionated about using Zod for schema definition, which is fine. Zod's a great library, but like I love all of the great things that BAML gives you for that. So I guess like my question is like more along the lines of like, do you ever see there being like some type of integration there of using like
So we
BAML with?
actually have a BAML integration with Vercel. All you have to do is like, so BAML under the hood.
You mean
so like
Next.js, right?
Yeah, we have a function called like summarize video. So what you can do in your VS in your code directly, like let's say you wanted to do this all in your front end code. I didn't actually do this here, but I could. We also do the thing for you where we just give you a hook that you can just use. Import. Let me do this from at AML client / React / hooks. So we have a function here called summarize video. So you got to use summarize video hook. And then what you can do is const equals use summarize video. And then you can have like a data as a summary, or you can have a mutate function and all the other state associated with it. And you can just go call this with whatever data you want. The summary is guaranteed to be a version of this type along the way. So you can do like,
And the partial type is the thing that has like based on your BAML code of like what's nullable in a stream, basically, right?
exactly. So you call like mutate. And when you call mutate, you get like a stream object along this, along the way, but the data object just updates along the way. So data
Oh, that's
becomes like
sick.
a
Okay,
part.
I didn't know y'all had that. So
So you and like when you do summary dot, you get like bullet points, and you can notice that all these things get like optionalized along the way. But what I could do is I could say, even during streaming, I want to guarantee that video summary key point is going to be. I actually want to guarantee that, hey, when I go send the video summary, I want key points to individually be stream.done. The key points field has to be done. So, or I can
So that would
mean
mean that like the hook would not start streaming data until the key points were all processed, and then you would start getting the partial object for all the rest of the fields.
until main takeaways
Okay.
is done. So now main takeaways becomes guaranteed to be a string array. Versus if you're trivially streaming, you now have to go do this, and now it becomes like a very complicated
Everything is
object.
now everything is nullable versus, hey, I guarantee that time data and main takeaways will always be true before I hand it to my
Right.
renderer.
I want to stream just this
Nice.
array. Each string should be individually streamed, and now you get a slightly different type. You get an array. Oh, whoops. This will render in a second. You get an array
Okay,
of
so
like.
you get
This should actually work. I'm surprised that this didn't work. Maybe the code gen is wrong for this. Let me check one more time. Bullet point. And we're actually in the middle, like redefining our types. Some stuff works with Go, which requires perfectly strict types and doesn't allow for any flexibility. So we're just finding a couple bugs in there. But the idea is like you when you're streaming, you actually live in a duality of type systems. And that is the part that people really miss out on. You really have two type trees you have to navigate, which is really, really complicated. So having utilities, like you can actually use TypeScript's partial type to go do that. So then when you go ahead and actually build something out, you want to go build like a really interactive component. Doing this should be trivial. Where I built a React component that analyzes and does this, but you can't really do that because this is working off of two type trees. And that is the hard part. And making that easy, I think, is something that Vercel's AI SDK doesn't actually do when you get to real complicated AI, real complicated JSON structures. Because if you have recursive types, you have nested objects, you can't define that well in Zod. You really need two Zod schemas to do that correctly.
Okay, thanks.
damn. That was welcome. That's why we call it advanced AI engineering, folks. That was sick.
There's another question. You want to talk about the email optimization? Yeah, I want to figure out why that's not working, but like what we can do here is like we can just make this test case really fast. I think Abhimanyu had the question. Do you want to summarize this question for me, Dex, while I get this working?
Yeah.
No, I don't have a question. Like when he mentioned about the AI SDK, I felt that while we were stripping Bolt New, which uses AI SDK, we kind of touched upon that part of the ecosystem, and I personally found out that there's no way to control what the LLM produces out when you use Versal SDK versus when you use BAML. So with Bolt New, the problem always existed that the model, the LLM, could generate anything, and Versal, there's no way to control it. So I was
You
just
mean like
wanna
structured object generation?
what?
You mean like structured object generation? Like
Yeah.
generating, yeah, it totally has that. It like generate object and stream objects. You just give it a Zod schema and tell it generate an object.
No, but
The
like,
problem with
how
structured
do you
object
evaluate the output of like, imagine you are generating a prompt. How do you make sure that uh, the response is sort of consistent, as in like, um, what we did was basically try to give examples of prompt engineering to the LLM itself while using the AI SDK. I didn't see a way of the SDK controlling the response generated from the LLM in a way that you can do with BAML. Like, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I'm
And the
not sure I
biggest, I think a
understand.
lot of people ask, like, why can't you just use structured generation? I think that's what Kyle's question here is, like, why doesn't that just work? The reason that structured generation really doesn't work fundamentally is that, like, for example, check out this email. This email that we have is literally outputting JSON with escape characters and new lines. That itself is going to lead to like a bias in the model. So what I really want to do is I want to somehow tell this draft to say at description, use triple quote strings for multi-line strings. And now when I go run this, it doesn't generate escape characters anymore. The email will just be better. Because instead of sampling for the best token that is parsable, I allow the model to output the best token it actually thinks is the best. And that makes a huge difference in quality for the model. Because when you're not doing this, Dexter had a great visual on this last time, which was basically saying something like this, which is when the model goes and generates that this is the token it wants to generate a new line character. And then there are other characters that it wants to go generate, like, oh, a backslash or a /n or something else along the way. When you go do this, when you do structured generation, you basically say you are not allowed to generate the new line character because you're inside of a quotation mark. That's not valid JSON, and you invalidate those tokens. We did this a lot in computer vision in the last 10 years, where you like tried to outsmart the model. It turns out just like let the model do its thing. The only reason that we have to do structured generation with JSON is because we don't have a better parser. If we had a better schema that we could go and like parse, then it would just do the trick for us, and we could let the model do whatever it wanted.
Yeah,
And that's why
JSON was like totally the wrong decision for structured generation, just in general. Like JSON should never have been the primitive for that. It should have been like TOML or YAML or something where it's much more like
Well, those have other
everyone
problems.
uses
token dense.
XML, right?
Well, you
Yeah, or
can't really use
XML.
TOML and YAML have the same problems. TOML and YAML are basically indiscernible for where they start, and their ambiguity as a starting point is really, really hard to misclarify because almost every file is a valid YAML file. So parsing that is virtually impossible because there's not enough constraints on it. XML has a similar problem where you run into escape characters with XML, and like the actual way that you do XML is so nasty. If you've seen how JSON looks in XML, like type systems in XML don't really make sense. They're too verbose. So it's not that there's one answer for everything. It's just that you want the flexibility as the app designer to choose what you want. If your goal as a developer is to generate HTML code, XML will be a bad format for you, guaranteed. Definition.
All right. I'm going to pause this on the structured output. This is a dope deep dive. We have 7 minutes left, and we have some really good questions in the chat. Derek has a hand raised. And then I really like Sean's question as well, which is like, how do you keep your database schemas consistent with your BAML generated types? I think that one is quick, right? We're just dumping JSON-B into the database, and the front end is parsing it using the BAML library. But then I want to hear Derek's question as well.
Literally the types that I save are just text, and I think I just do JSON. I think I actually have this is not the latest table. I had to do some migrations. Where's my migrations table? I added all of these became JSON-Bs. They're just JSON-Bs. So I just open and close JSON-B files, JSON-B columns along the way. And then I just cast it because I know it's correct. The hard part about this is versioning tables over time, but this is the same problem that you'd have at versioning at any other point in your code base. We will have a solution for that really soon, actually. It's going to be really exciting. But that's a separate conversation. Versioning schemas is really, really hard.
All right,
There's another.
Derek, what you got?
Just a quick question. You've made me think earlier when you were doing the summarize, I had put a suggestion, maybe synthesize all of the variable names functions aside. Really, it's that first sentence where you say summarize this. But then now I was first going to ask about evals and like an approach. If you wanted to try a few different versions of that sentence, how would you eval it? But then now I'm thinking it's more complex because synthesis, because of the way you've blocked this into those time chunks, then it may not even, like synthesize across them. So if this question's making any sense, how would you handle that to kind of eval it, given that you've taken a chunked approach now?
Well, I would just
Sorry,
evaluate
chunk.
step the pipeline.
Yeah.
Like I think
Chunked meaning the transcript time chunks. So like now you'd have to look across those chunks to do a synthesis as opposed to summarizing each one. That's what I meant. So hopefully I'm making sense with my question.
No, okay. So this was, I mean, we haven't actually, I don't think we've actually done that yet. But the proposal was like, hey, we could make the transcript a little bit shorter, and that may actually not be the right idea.
Yeah,
But
I
then
probably
you'd have
wouldn't.
to basically have you basically have to have a separate eval that is like, okay, based on our chunking prompt and our chunking algorithm, and how do we take those chunks and pass it back in? We're no longer evaluating just input-output pairs. We're now evaluating kind of a few steps of the pipeline, which is also really important to do, right? The best eval is the one that actually runs your pipeline end to end and tells you if it's still working. And then you can go refine down into the smaller level ones, smaller chunks of your pipeline, and then individual prompts to narrow down like, okay, what's the thing that broke this? But I think the answer is like, that's probably not what we would do. That was just a proposal, like, because you have control of the pipeline, you can do whatever you want. I don't know if that's a great answer. Thumbs up. All right, we'll take it.
Cool. So let's actually make the email better really fast, by the way, while I'm here. Email example, we're going to do this. An example. Great email was this.
Sahil's question is, now that we have an automated pipeline, are they going to get the video upload now instead of Friday?
No, because we're gonna make the pipeline good. I think one of the things I hate as an engineer is I fucking hate emails. I want emails to be useful or not at all received. So Dexter and I actually do some good work to actually go edit the pipeline to make the emails good. So like in this case,
Yeah.
I literally fed an example of here's what it is, fed in the example, and it's gonna go ahead and it's gonna go ahead and now read the prompt. I actually told it a great email was this. A great email for a prior video was this. And now I'll notice the small things that I noticed immediately, which is these bullet points are labeled wrong. So I want to go and like format these better. So let's go do that. Or like, let's just make the prompt better. And like, that's great. I don't need to tell. I don't need to
that's sick.
Topic in this. Again, let's go read this. Looks good. Main takeaways looks good. Transcript. Complete transcript.
Sick.
Full transcript. We'll go do this. I will probably move the transcript above the main takeaways.
Yep.
Because again, the model can be biased mostly by the most recent tokens. So I'm gonna go do that. So I want the main takeaways to be last. It's gonna go do this. I'm using GPT-4o mini. Let's just try and see what happens.
I've heard GPT. I've experimented a little bit. The GPT 4.5 is very good at these sort of writing tasks.
Did a couple of things. If you notice, it said your name. That's a prior video. Create a professional announcement on behalf of Bob and Dexter. Let's tell it that. Let's tell it that's on behalf of us, so it can have more context again. And this is why we can use a few shot example, because this example is a really, really good example for what we want. In this case, it didn't put a call to action in the data model. The call to action is probably dumb.
Are you hitting context limits on 4.0 mini maybe? Because it's so long.
I'm not. There's no way.
Okay. Okay.
Let's go do this. Let's make call to action optional. And it actually, seems like it figured it out. We can go read this really fast. So this was about dynamic strategies for effective prompting. This is weird. And last time's video title was actually, we already had a title. The title was called Cracking the Prompting Interview. So before I go add in parameter, let's say like, let's just like assume that the title that I passed in, I can just change this in my test case. Summary. Let's assume that I gave it the right title. Oh, at the bottom.
Yeah, your title says Zoom meeting.
Cracking the prompting interview. So I'll go run this. New video release, cracking the prompting interview. This is pretty good. It actually got rid of the Zoom meeting, gave a slightly better title. It actually almost got the exact same email that we actually really wanted. Use indexes instead of relying on long URLs. That's a great thing. Natural output, let it go in the most natural format instead of constraining them to JSON, which is a thing that we should do. Really format the structure as you want, read the prompt, balancing effectiveness. That looks like spam. Real world applications, that looks like spam. So what we can do now is we can just like compare this to the actual thing that we sent out. And we can go see what it feels like. And this was the one that we wrote by hand for this one. There's a couple of things that didn't have like these. One of the things that we probably like is we like having code in the emails, like small little code snippets in backtext in the emails. It makes, I think, makes it much more authentic. Didn't seem to capture that. So let's just tell it that we like that. Where'd it go? We can tell it this in the draft. Include code snippets. Include small code snippets in the emails. And now let's go run this. And let's see if it does something. And I might actually have a hard time including code snippets because it's just from an audio snippet. So what I might need to do is I might actually need to feed in the video into this as well. So I can actually have video as context while it does this. So we should get the YouTube URL for the YouTube video and just pass into like a Gemini model and go pass that in. And that would be like the next thing that I would go iterate on along the way. Are you guys understanding how we iterate on this pipeline and make it better to make it really feel like what's good? What's good here, I want you all to notice, is Dexter and I already have done this work a few times. So we have a golden target in mind. If we're working on a data set that neither of us understands, there's no golden target and we'll be stuck and we won't be able to get an answer really well. So we can iterate fast without an eval set because we kind of understand the domain of the problem. Is there any other questions along the way? Dexter, anything else you want to mention?
No, the other reason why we can't send this out right away because Zoom takes like 4 hours to process the video and create the transcript. So yeah, that's to answer Sahil's other question. We will, no matter how much AI we have, we will never send the video immediately after the call.
Yes, because of Zoom. And we might be able to get around to 1 day turnaround as well. But again, the whole point of this is
don't you go present to the AI team at Zoom? Don't you have like influence over how can't you make it faster?
Yeah, let me ping them. But I think I think the takeaway here is like build the tools that you need, build the workflow first. Once you've built the workflow, add the AI part because you can decouple that development really fast. And whatever I have to do to generate the email draft, my real suspicion to make this email really good is actually I should actually break down the structure of this email into like separate sections that we have and write a 2-step pipeline where the first step generates all the structure, then the second step puts it into the like the language and the floweriness of what the email needs. And I think that will make it a lot better. But I think that's it. We went a little bit over than what we planned on doing today. But this was tons of fun. I personally learned a lot building this whole thing out, way more than I normally do. Because I learned from Dexter out of vibe code. It was amazing.
You were pretty good at vibe coding before when we got started.
No, I'm not. I think I do. My vibe coding is very